Now, just explain this, if you will, to our viewers. There's been discontent in Mali for some time now, even before this disputed election several weeks ago. Give us some context about how the situation got to this point.
Well, this is a country that's been in crisis really for more or less a decade continuously. And in fact, 8 years ago, there was a previous military coup which led to a transition and another election where Keita was elected president. But even when he took over, already there was a conflict going on with jihadist groups in the north of Mali. And over that subsequent 8 years, he has not managed to complete either the military success required to bring the jihadist attacks under control, or to complete a peace process with other armed groups in the north. There's been a sense that his leadership has been weak, if you like, lacking in vision. There hasn't really been a clear strategy either for these big political and security issues, or even for the basic day-to-day issues of managing the economy, living standards, agriculture, public services, the things that impact on the life of everyday ordinary Malians. And there have, as your film mentioned, there have been widespread allegations of corruption, reaching quite high into the state, accusations relating to some people close to him as well. So that has deepened popular anger. And what really brought all this to the boil was that after parliamentary elections in March and April this year, the Constitutional Court intervened and basically changed the results for 31 seats in order to bolster the position of the president's camp in parliament. And after that, popular anger really boiled over on the streets. So this is a crisis that's been going on for a long time.
Right. So what's the likelihood now that this coup could actually help the situation in Mali, or are we just heading into more chaos?
Well, at one level, a simplistic answer would be to say, well, this coup solves a problem, because the protesters had been calling for Keita's resignation, and he was refusing to resign because he was elected in an election in 2018, which, although it had some flaws, was broadly democratic. And ECOWAS, the West African group of countries to which Mali belongs, was backing that stance, saying he should agree to a national government, but he should not be forced out of office because he had the legitimacy of the ballot box, if you like. So now that the military have forced him to resign, a simplistic reading would be to say, oh, well, that's okay. He's quit. Now we can have a transition and new elections. But things are not that simple. For a start, this is hugely destabilizing. West Africa has been trying to establish the principle that military coups, military interventions, unconstitutional changes of government are not legitimate. And when they have taken place over the last decade or so, for example, in Niger and in Burkina Faso, they've usually been to remove governments that were acting in an authoritarian way or dismantling democratic safeguards. None of that was really true of Keita. Despite the problem with the parliamentary election results, nobody could accuse Keita of being authoritarian or repressive, if you like. So the legitimacy of the coup is in question from that point of view. And it makes it therefore really difficult for ECOWAS, the West African bloc, and the international community, who are strongly supporting the ECOWAS stance, to plot a course out of this crisis that doesn't risk knock-on effects for the rest of the region.
Right, and that was going to be my next question. What kind of reaction has there been from the international community, and how can it get involved in this situation?
Well, the international community has basically put its weight fully behind ECOWAS. And ECOWAS last night, in the middle of the night, announced really tough sanctions. The military have said they've closed the borders, but actually ECOWAS had already shut the borders of Mali with all of its neighbors. And they've imposed financial sanctions, and they've shown in previous regional crises that because Mali is part of a single currency bloc whose central bank is actually in another country, in Dakar, in Senegal, they can paralyze the financial system if they want to, which can put huge pressure on whoever is in charge in Mali. So ECOWAS is applying a lot of pressure, but it isn't really clear quite yet how we move to the next stage, whether we can move to a transition that is genuinely democratic and doesn't have a knock-on effect for the rest of the region. And there are also questions about the background behind this military intervention. Certainly, many of soldiers were angry about the difficult conditions in which they're being sent to the north to fight the jihadists, with a shortage of equipment, grievances over their pay and conditions. But there's also anger among ordinary soldiers, a feeling that some senior officers have been benefiting from privileges or even been corrupt. But there's also a further complication, which is that elements of the Malian army had been accused of human rights abuses in the north, and the UN had started to really pile on the pressure for the Malian government to take action on that front and to call to account, to bring to justice people in the security forces who have been accused of possible links to massacres of civilians, particularly in central Mali. And so one might speculate, we don't yet have firm evidence about this, but one might speculate that some people in the military actually had an interest, if you like, in seeing a disruption of the normal political and constitutional process that could lead to these to judicial action against the interests of certain people.